So welcome to today's show, and thank you everyone for tuning in. On the show today, we are excited to be introducing you to Sylvester Jenkins III, who is an author, influential speaker, mental health advocate, and combat veteran. He empowers the next generation to become resilient leaders to thrive instead of survive in life. So welcome to the show, Sylvester. It's great to have you here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here and share dialogue dealing with everything that's going on.
Awesome. So as we always like to do with our guests, if you would just like to just take a bit of a moment just to give us a bit of a background on really who you are, where you're from, what you're up to in the world.
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Sylvester Jenkins III. I'm from Columbus, Georgia. I'm a father, husband, father of four, 3 boys, 1 girl, but spent 21 years in the military, just recently retired in August of 2020. A lot of things transpired during that time frame. Found myself at a dark place just due to the fact of the pandemic, trying to find financial stability after transitioning from the military, and then also just trying to find myself, trying to find a new norm dealing with the pandemic going on. So in that process, I was able to really gain self-awareness and learn about myself to be able to help others that was transitioning from the military, and then also just in general dealing with life, because I faced a lot of battles outside of just Iraq and Afghanistan. I was deployed 5 times. I went 4 times to Iraq, 1 time to Afghanistan, but I was able to make it back home. And you know, a lot of the battles that we faced are normally in the mind. So I just try to focus in those areas in order to help the next generation become resilient leaders, try and succeed in life.
Beautiful.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. And what I'd love to do is, before we go on to that kind of aspect on how you help people, is would you be also able to share with us some kind of pivotal moments and challenges from your life that have really had like a mental, emotional, or like a physical effect on you, which has kind of led you to what you do now?
Oh, absolutely. So I experienced childhood adversity. I experienced a lot of childhood adversity due to the fact I grew up in a single parent home, gang and drug infested neighborhood, ran in the streets for a long period of time in my life, just due to the fact that my mom wasn't really able to physically be there because she had to work and provide for the rest of us. But that's where I seen the true nature of resilience in my mother, because I seen her fall down 7 times and get back up 8. But in the process, you know, I didn't grow up with a masculine male figure in my life. So I grew up with that identity issues, trying to find my identity, and just having that sense of toxic masculinity, because, you know, when you're a child and you try to show emotions, they tell you that, you know, it's a sign of weakness, that like, oh, you need to toughen up. Don't cry, boys don't cry, men don't cry, those type of things. So I was always looking for purpose. And I joined the military to find purpose and just to get out of that environment. And, you know, just going through the military, they tear you down to build you back up into a soldier. And, you know, as you're going along, you can't show emotion either at that time, because it can get you killed. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of people in the military frown upon any type of behavioral health. Like when you're going through those mental roadblocks, those mental challenges, and they see it as a sign of weakness, like, hey, if you go to behavioral health, that means you're not stable for the military and all these things, which is not the case. Everybody needs to go through a sense of therapy at some point in time in their life, especially if you went through a lot of trauma prior to the military. And I went through an acrimonious divorce during one of my deployments, so I came back home to nothing, but I had to suck it up. I had to suck it up and deal with it and drive on, because I was in a leadership role. I had multiple soldiers up under me. So I had to maintain faith in order to not only motivate and inspire them, but to also just keep pushing along, dealing with my life. But the most pivotal moment for me was when my mother passed away on a recent deployment that I had back in 2019. So she passed away during the time frame of me being on that deployment. I was also going through hardships, dealing with my relationship at that time, being away from my kids. All these things just like came down on me. So I'm in charge of a company of 160 soldiers at this time. So not only am I dealing with my own personal demons, but I'm also dealing with their lives as well. And I had multiple soldiers who was going through the motion of suicide ideation. They was getting into accidents on the road when they was out there on missions. So it was just one thing after another. And I got to a point where I just couldn't take it no more. I felt like Superman just had to be Clark Kent. I had to realize that I was human. And when I did that, I went straight to behavioral health. I pretty much kicked down their door and told them that I need help. And when I told them that I needed help, they told me, hey, calm down. We're going to do everything in our power to get you the way you need to be. And just going through the motion of some of the things that they showed me, exercises, strategies, and things of that nature, I was able to not only help myself, but those around me as well. So I just continued to add to that when it came to what I do now.
Thank you so much, obviously, for sharing all of that. There's so many ways that we could go into this conversation further, but I think that there's two key things that really stood out for me. One is on the identity, and it's almost searching for a sense of identity, finding it, being almost molded into a soldier. I'm curious to know how that's then impacted you after, but before you answer that, I'd love to get your thoughts on just a little bit more around the fact that behavioral support is just almost frowned upon, right? It's almost like things are just it equals being unstable in a sense when it comes to societal connotations. But the reality is we go to the gym for our physical health, right? We go to therapy for our mental health. Like there's so many different aspects of it. Like I'm going to assume from what you've just described, you've had so many stresses just stack on top of each other that you kind of got to that point of breaking down the therapy door, right? So like at what point were you at? Like how much was you really suffering for you to actually say, hands up, I need help right now? Like at what point was you at kind of mentally, if you could describe that?
I was at a level of a 10. I was like an erupted volcano, honestly, because I had suppressed so much, not only from my childhood, adulthood, because you think as I went along, everything dealing with my past, I never expressed that. I never got the opportunity to release that or speak on it or anything like that. I never got the help for it. So it was just like a soda when you shake it up. As soon as I start to release that top, it just explodes. That's the same way I was during that time frame.
Yeah, damn. But and the crazy part is that then moves you into that action to actually get that support you need. And it's a common thing that we see is we wait until we're experiencing that can fizzing up so much that then we have to. What would you say to somebody that's listening that maybe isn't quite at that fizzing up and exploding point, but they can see it coming? They know, they're listening to you talk and they're like, I'm on that path, I can feel it, it's coming. What would you say to them? Would you be telling them to wait until explosion before you get help? Or
I always express mental health in one of your daily lives. Something that I got is called the 4 canteens of life. And it deals with a physical canteen, a mental canteen, a social canteen, and a spiritual canteen. And I feel like by you drinking out of all 4 of these canteens on a daily basis, it'll prevent you from dehydrating from any type of stress, anxiety, depression, because once you focus on your mental health, everything starts in the mind first. So, your mind controls your emotions. Your emotions controls your behavior, which goes over into your actions. So all of these flows generate from right here. So if you don't focus on your mind and you don't go get that help, all you're going to do is just become that volcano and erupt. So it's best to always focus on your mental health on a daily basis. Watch what you put into what you tune into is what you turn into. Absolutely. Because your mind just goes to your strongest focus. Whatever you focus on at that time, if you're going through a divorce, guess what? Your mind is going to focus on the hurt and the pain dealing with that divorce. But as long as you keep on trying to seek that help, that counsel, in order to overcome those things that you're dealing with during that time frame, you'll make it through.
Awesome. What was you focusing on when you broke down that behavior expert's door?
I'll be honest with you. During that time frame, I was at plateau. I was at my apex. I was done. I was at a moment where I just wanted to end it all. I didn't care what I had to do. I just wanted to get through the hurt and the pain that I was dealing with. It was so much that I was dealing with inside that I couldn't express it to nobody. I was afraid to be honest with you. I was afraid to express it to my leadership. I was afraid to express it to my soldiers because of the role that I played in my company. So it was just difficult for me to just go around and just be like, hey, I'm hurting right now.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm in so much pain.
Yeah.
And because all the expectation is for everybody, we're human. And sometimes we're not gonna have that sense of empathy for those individuals that come to us and express those things to us. But once you gain that self-awareness and that empathy, then you'll be able to really help or point people in the right direction. But yeah, it was a difficult moment for me, and I just never wanted to go back to there again.
Yeah. So what was your focus then after that? So you've got that point, you're thinking about ending it all. You're now growing this beautiful skill set of self-awareness and empathy. Was it the self-awareness and empathy that became your new focus, or was there something else in present?
So yes. So when I developed a sense of self-awareness, I learned that I need to live in the present. I need to stop worrying about. I need to stop being a worrier and become a warrior, because dealing with looking at the past, I noticed I had developed a sense of depression. But when I started to look at the future or what the outcome could possibly be, I started to get a case of anxiety. So I noticed that I needed to live in the present. So I always had to be aware of the things that I was going through at that time. So it was the self-awareness, the emotional intelligence that really got me to the point that I am today.
Beautiful. I'm curious to just touch upon what we mentioned earlier about identity then. So obviously, as you're now focused on the present and now obviously serving others right up till today, how did you build or reconnect with the true sense of who you are once you've expressed all of this? So because right now, to be fair, you're being vulnerable, you're sharing that you was afraid to express how you were feeling, coming from a dude that's like, spent all these years holding everything in. That's a huge paradigm shift. So how does your identity play its role in your recovery?
Absolutely. So I had something that I call the 3 R's, where I reflect, recognize, and release. So I reflected on everything that transpired in my past, of course, just dealing with the hurt, the pain, trying to relive some of the things. And I learned that, my parents was just learning too. They were still going through the motions of trying to figure out their way as far as being adults. Nobody ever taught them like, hey, this is what you should do as a dad. I know my father, who I now communicate with quite often, who's very, involved with my kids' life, who I never had a strong relationship with. I had to let go of all that stuff. I had to really release it. I had to recognize some of the things that they was experiencing, because they were hurt too. They went through trauma. They dealt with certain things that I would never, have thought about at that time as a kid. And when I dealt with the whole identity issue, as trying to find myself, it was hard as a kid. It's hard to, like, man, who's my, what my father is really like. I see all these other kids with their dads, or they get the opportunity to do things. They know who they are. They really know who they are. All I know is that my mother worked tooth and nail to provide for me and my brother. I know her side of the family. I know everything, but you got that missing piece. You always want to know, like, the whole puzzle. You never want to know just one side of it. So I'm trying to figure out, like, who are my, who is my dad? Like, what's his background and everything else. So as I slowly become a man, or a young man, now I'm starting to feel like a sense of no worth. I don't feel no worth. I don't feel no value. I'm steady trying to figure out, like, what's going on around me. It was difficult. I just figured the military will just put me in that position. Like, oh, I know the military is gonna, hey, you hear people say all the time, you go to the military, you'll become a man. You go to the military, they're gonna teach you everything you need to know in order to become a man. You'll go in there, you'll become a model citizen for your country, you're serving, defend, you got purpose, So that was just like the key for me. I was like, oh, that's it right there. I'm going into the military.
And since leaving the military, has that shifted your identity? Because of having spoken and worked with some veterans as well, it's like they feel like sometimes their sense of identity almost gets stripped away in some ways. Did you experience that on any level?
Yes, absolutely. You go. So you got to think. We're built off habits, right? So of course, me serving in the military 21 years, you gain that identity of being this soldier. And just the position and rank that I was at in my career, it just caused me, once I made that shift to becoming a civilian again, it made it more, it was challenging. It was challenging. It was a new norm for me. I had to get comfortable with being uncomfortable because it's something I couldn't go back to. I couldn't go back to joining the military. It was a wrap. My career was over with. It was done. And just making that transition, you felt like you didn't have that same purpose or value that you didn't have before. That you had before. And I had to really, go through the motions of, hey, like this is no longer your life. Now you need to focus on being a husband and a father. Now you need to focus on your new career because this is no longer a part of your life. So yeah, it was a battle for a moment.
Your turnaround has been pretty quick from when you obviously introduced, 2020, you said you retired.
Yeah, so I retired August 2020. Now, trust me, the military give you a year to transition from the start. So I started transitioning in 2019.
Okay.
And my actual retirement date was August 2020. So they gave me a year in between to get all my stuff together. So if you want to look at it, it's been roughly going on 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I bet it's felt longer than that at times, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you definitely seem to be a man on a mission now, that's for sure.
Definitely. And I remember kind of when we spoke a while ago, one of the things you were talking about was that concept of combat to comeback. And obviously you've done that literally from a battlefield to basically to where you are now in quite quick succession relatively compared to a lot of people we've seen and we know that it's taken a longer time to get to that point. But one thing you mentioned and one thing you said that combat isn't just on the battlefield, and it's also in our daily lives and mainly within ourselves. So and I remember the one thing that you mentioned was basically the biggest enemy we'll ever face is our the inner me, our inner selves, our mind. Can you elaborate on this a bit more? Because a lot of people who have never and will never ever experience a battlefield scenario and then a war scenario. So can you elaborate a bit more about that biggest enemy being within?
Oh, absolutely. So like I said before, so I got a book called Winning the Battle Within. It mostly speaks on psychological resilience because I feel that is one of the strategies in order to win the battle on the mind. So when we look at our mind, right, we think about there are special forces that I call special forces, and that's fear, self-doubt, that inner critic. Those things come and attack your mind when it comes to you pursuing and doing everything that you want in life. A lot of times we don't know that we made a decision when we actually have. So if you choose not to do something, you've actually made a decision, regardless of whether you said, yeah, I'm going to do this or not. Like if you make a plan to go to the gym and then all of a sudden you don't, you made a decision, but you don't realize that because of the subconscious mind, your habits. And when you go through these battles of trying to overcome these situations, it's all up here. It starts up here first. So I say that we deal with combat outside of just actual combat environments due to the fact that we deal with financial hardship. We deal with relationship hardships. We face adversity on a daily basis. Everybody faces adversity at some point in time in their life. And when they face that adversity at some point in time in their life, how do they overcome it? Because it can take over your mind and everything that you think. Because you can sit there and think like, after you went through that divorce, you can be like, I'm not good enough to be in another relationship. I'm afraid that if I get into another relationship, that it won't be as good. And it's all because of up here. You don't really know that. You haven't really taken the time. But if you focus on that, guess what? That's exactly what's going to happen. But if you shift your mindset to really focus on the positive, next relationship I get into, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. I'm going to change my whole narrative as far as the way I grew up in life. I'm going to be a positive male figure for my children. I'm going to do everything in my power to be a model citizen, to make sure that I go above and beyond to represent my family, my last name, so I can represent any way possible for not only myself, but those around me as well. These are the things that we tend not to focus on because of the hardships that we face. And it all is wrapped up in your mind. It's all wrapped up in the subconscious mind, which tend to become a habit. So what you have to do is just, take control of your mind, because you control that. Your body doesn't control your mind controls your body. So you really have to take control of your mind in order to take control of your body, in order to execute the things that you want to do.
So how, if someone listening to this think, obviously you're resonating with that, and they said, how do I take back that control? Like, what would you advise them? What would you give them as a starting point to try and take that control back?
Absolutely. So a real quick trick that they can do is write down everything that they worry about, everything that they dealt with. I mean, like, write it down on paper. And when they write it down on paper, mark out everything that they can control. Mark out everything that they can't control, and then focus on everything that they can control and start to tackle those issues. Once you do that, you'll develop a sense of courage. You'll develop a sense of confidence. And then you'll go through the motions of continuing to try and build on those areas that you've been able to overcome. And I also say, hey, watch what you watch. Watch what you watch, because a lot of things that you feed your mind, it's just like a garden. If you feed it with negativity, the negative weeds will grow. But if you feed it with positivity, flowers, lilies, roses, all these things will grow to the point where you're sustaining what goes on dealing with your thought process. And if you don't do this, then you'll continue to live in this negative rut, and then you want to make sure that you focus on the people that you hang around, because you can't soar with eagles running with chickens. That's just plain and simple. You can't. So you want to make sure that you're hanging around the right people. You want to make sure that you're hanging around people that's going to influence you, push you, motivate you, influence you to do the right thing. Because if you don't, you'll just be just like them.
Yeah, so proximity is key. And yeah. I love what you said there, is like about what we're watching as well and what we're consuming. I think the average right now is something like 6 hours a day people are spending just on social media, not just on their phones, but just on the social media app, which is insane to me. Right. But the reality is we're looking for that connection. And one of the canteens you described earlier was that social canteen, and we're looking for that, and we're looking for it because there's that core need within us, and it's so easy to latch on because there is a bit of desperation for that connection. We've been starved of it, especially with the pandemic and things like that, that we're then latching on to almost the first or second or third thing that we get our hands on, in a sense. And that's not always serving. So I love the fact that you said that. It's like, watch what you watch, because that's the step to then who you're going to be hanging out with, isn't it? Because then you hang out with the people you've got stuff in common with. So if you're watching stuff that doesn't serve you, you're probably going to end up hanging out with people that don't serve you. And to grow, like you said, we have to be aware of that contagion, because we play a role in that ourselves, don't we? Like the way we show up, we're either going to influence somebody positively or negatively. Right. Based on the subconscious choices that you mentioned. So I love that you shared that. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to obviously bring it to the book that you mentioned about, obviously called Winning the Battle Within. Is that book more based on your kind of story, what you went through, or is it a mix of that plus practical tips, stuff that people can use to help them to, win the battle within, basically?
Right, absolutely. So it's a story dealing with me. It's not only based off my life, but it's also research and biblical studies.
Awesome. So definitely, if anyone's obviously interested in that, we'll definitely put the links in the show notes to that one, so they can have a look and read more in depth about your incredible story. One thing the question I want to ask next, we asked this question to Mike Bethune, who's a friend of yours, who we had on our podcast a while back. He was on, I think, podcast 102. If anyone's listening who wants to go and check that out as well, it's called Taking Your Power Back, which is a very powerful story, just like yours, which is why obviously he talked about you when we asked this question to him. And the question is basically, one thing we've noticed is that when individuals really focus on their own personal growth and they start overcoming their stress and what they're experiencing, and they start to kind of win that battle within, as you call it, they start to create this ripple effect, and they really want to contribute more when they start to do that inner work. So the question is what impact do you think it will have on the world when people stop being in combat with life, with themselves, and really start to win that battle within and start to overcome what's holding them back?
Oh wow, man, that's a great question. I believe, man, like, we are God's greatest form of creation, and I feel that a lot of times that we take the opportunity to sleep on ourselves when we have so much more. We are the only creatures on this earth that have the mindset to do whatever we want to do. Like, you will never see a monkey that tries to fly. You will never see it, but man can, right? We can fly planes, helicopters, jets, because we're his greatest form of creation. So if people don't take the opportunity to focus on these areas dealing with their mind, because we're made in his likeness and his image, so we can always overcome any battle that we might face. And we're such a powerhouse when it comes to facing these obstacles that we might endure. If you look at it, 99.9% of the time, any adversity that you face, you've overcome it. This too shall pass. Anything that you're going through, anything that you having difficulties with at this moment in time, guess what? It's going to pass. And when it does pass, you could be like, man, I got through that one. If you got through that one, guess what? You'll get through another one. Just keep that in mind when you're going through a lot of the situations and circumstances that you go through, that you are the greatest form of creation on this earth. You can do anything you put your mind to. Anything.
I love that. And it's clear, it's very clear to us that you said, obviously, in your military experience, you know, using a leadership role, you're clearly still leading and being a man of service, not only to your country, you're global now. Like, people listen to this show all over the world. I know you're on other shows and things. So you're really, really making that impact. So I'm curious to know why it's so important for you to be helping the next generation when it comes to resilience. Why is that so important to you?
Absolutely. So I believe that it's important to influence the next generation to not follow in the same path or the roads that we did. If we train the child in the way they should go, they'll never depart. They will always be able to push it down to the next generation and the next generation after that. It wouldn't be a point where we're just now discovering these things. If you look at it, how important was mental health 5 years ago? It wasn't a big issue or concern until after the pandemic. So why aren't we trying to really teach this to the next generation? Because we know this is where it all really lies at. This is the most pivotal part of our lives. This is what influences everything that we do. So if we focus more on mental health, dealing with them, or if we focus more on general areas that they need that's going to be more beneficial to them, then of course, they're just going to pass it down to the next generation, and it just become a ripple effect. So that's been my focus, and that's the main reason why I feel like everybody was built to serve at some capacity, and you just need to find that niche when it comes down to serving at your capacity, and that's mine.
Nice. Awesome.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, when we do start doing that work and we start to become more aligned with our mental health, our emotional health, our physical health, we do have that longing and that calling to serve and to do something bigger and help and make a difference in the world, no matter how small or how big. And it's just it's so powerful when anyone gets to experience that, and they get to kind of step out and start to think, Oh, okay, great. Like now I'm in a resourceful place to think that what can I do to give back? What can I do to serve others and make their lives better as well, which is amazing. So if
what would you say to somebody that's listening to this and they're not sure in how they want to serve yet?
Well, I would say take a moment to really just take 10, 15 minutes of your time. Now, at any capacity, you'll be able to serve. I'm gonna be honest with you. It feels good to just be able to do something. I don't know nobody that felt bad about helping someone in some type of, just in general. You get that shot of, dopamine just by somebody telling you thank you for helping me, holding the door open, donating clothes to the homeless, handing out food at a shelter. When you do these things, man, you get that shot of dopamine. So regardless of what area you try to look at, you're always gonna feel good about serving in general. But at the same time, I always tell those people to really take a moment and reflect on something that you experienced in your life, because a lot of times the things that we find that we're meant to serve at is something that we dealt with in our own lives. If you look at me, I grew up, just the way I grew up as a kid. I felt like, oh man, this is my area of focus, because I don't want to see another kid go through that. I don't want to see the next generation deal with some of the things that I dealt with, dealing with my mental and emotional health. So that's been, you see how I just pivot to that. That's been my focus, because I'm able to relate, I'm able to connect. So it's always something that I feel you can connect with in order to find your niche and serve it.
Yeah, definitely. I think every single person we've had on the podcast and over 100 episodes now has pretty much come from that space of they don't want to see somebody else go through what they've been through. That's why we do what we do today as well, is because everybody's got their own unique way of getting through it as well. And everybody resonates with different people. That's why it's so important that people get to hear these messages. So thank you so much for sharing yours. And I think a lot of people off the back of this episode and just what you said there alone, going through that whole like reflecting and releasing that you mentioned earlier, but then now being able to then look and be like, okay, well as I've reflected, what was present, what is the thing that I have overcome, what has passed that I got through, and that's definitely going to leave some clues, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So if you could give one piece of practical advice to anyone listening who may be struggling with their mental health or emotional health, or the general overall well-being, like what would you say to them and why?
I would tell them I would believe carpe diem, seize the day. Yeah. And I say that because you don't know the time, the hour, or when you'll get another chance. I believe in now, no opportunity wasted. So if you find yourself at a point where you have that anxiety, you have that depression, you're dealing with a lot of stress, seek behavioral health, because if you don't, you can just end up in a position or a place that you don't want to be in. I know the path that you're going down, whoever listening, is dark, and it's a long, dark road, and it's hard to keep walking down that path when you don't feel like the sun would ever shine again. And it's difficult to get out of that rut, but at the same time, it's possible. So I would tell everybody out there, this is the main reason why you need to get out of that rut, because you're not meant to be there. You're not meant to be in that position. What you're meant to do is be phenomenal. You got to go from being average. You got to go from being average to savage. You got to go from being ordinary to extraordinary. And that's because that's who you truly are. You're extraordinary in everything that you do. So don't waste the time dwelling on something that you can't control. Focus on the right now. No opportunity wasted, and move full speed ahead in everything that you have going on.
Nice. It's worth it to go on that journey, isn't it? It's worth it, and the time is now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no better time than the now.
So in the last, let's say the last year for you, because we've heard a lot of kind of, in the last 5 years or so, in the last year, what's the biggest shift in belief or new behavior or habit that's most improved your personal life experience?
The biggest shift for me was realizing that I was God's greatest form of creation. I never thought that I never felt like I was worthy. I always had that sense of self-doubt, that sense of fear. When the only reason why I was able to progress in the military was because I figured out the formula. Everything rises and falls on leadership. So I focused in that area, but I never focused on me. I never focused on me at no point in time. I focused on being the best soldier. I focused on being the best father. I focused on being the best husband, but I never focused on being the best me. So when I focused on being the best me, that was the greatest shift in everything that I did, because I was able to find those nuggets, those areas that I was lacking at. I was able to put them on paper and find those triggers that them things that put me in that position to feel that sense of fear, that sense of anxiety, that self-talk, that self-doubt, and be able to, just knock them down and conquer them. So that's been, the most pivotal point for me.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I hope people listening can adopt that. I know we're just soaking it in, just listening to you speak.
Absolutely. So, Sylvester, is there anything else you would love to add to this conversation? You've said a lot, you've shared a lot, which is just profound and amazing, but is there anything else you can think of you think our listeners need to hear?
For me at this moment, I just want to tell anybody who's listening to this podcast right now, if you feel like you're broken, just remember that even broken crayons can still color.
Nice.
I like that. I've never heard that before. That's perfect. So listen, Sylvester, where can our listeners find your book, and where can they find you to follow the great work that you're doing?
Absolutely. So you can find me on any social media platform, LinkedIn, IG, Facebook, but you can go to my website at sylvesterjenkins.com and find all my books on there. The main one that we're speaking on currently is Winning the Battle Within. I have 3 other books on there that's able to get you to that point of being not only a warrior and to turn your obstacles into opportunity, but to also be a phenomenal leader and effective leader.
Perfect.
Awesome. We'll put obviously all the links to the book, to your website, everything into the show notes so people can easily find you. We just want to say a huge thank you for being on our show today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and thank you so much for obviously sharing your story, being vulnerable. We're just so grateful for you and just for your experiences and what you shared with us today. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity and the time to be on your platform.
No, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and I think our listeners are going to take a lot away from this, as we will always listen back to these podcasts as well for our own personal growth and development. There's always something to learn, and I wish you all the best with your mission, and I hope our paths cross again soon.
Yes, likewise.